I have created multiple statue designs, such as Maleo Torquent and Billiards Domino. The castings of the cauliflower ear statues will be taken from the molds that were created from the cauliflower ears of male combat sports athletes who are men. That is Billiards Domino, my vision of the monument. I wanted to go over that part of my speech again because towards the end I was rushed and things got a bit rigid for me. So I just wanted to go over that again and make that clear. Now I want to talk about Marius Gustavson and LGBTQ, because Marius Gustavson is something that people in the LGBTQ community should know about. Marius Gustavson was seen as a leader in the LGBTQ community in Europe. Marius Gustavson was very much involved in the LGBTQ community. Marius Gustavson marched to promote gender confusion. Marius Gustavson was arrested for creating dark web media. Marius Gustavson was running a site called eunuchmaker.com. Marius Gustavson was preying on physically traumatized and insecure men. And he was drugging them and trying to convince them to castrate themselves on video for the profits of Marius Gustavson. Meaning, Marius Gustavson was going to LGBTQ community events so that he could find men who were confused about their gender. And so this is the stigma, or just the reality attachment to something like LGBTQ. That community will always struggle with something like Marius Gustavson, right? Where some creepy guy goes to places where he knows that men are confused about their gender or their sexual identity, and he will try to manipulate them and convince them to castrate themselves on camera for his profits. He was arrested because of a human trafficking complication, basically, right? The sex change doctors in America who are licensed or whatever will say something in response to this like, oh, well, if you want to get a sex change, you should definitely do it the right way, Marius Gustavson was doing dark web sex changes, right? That's why it was called Eunuch Maker. Marius Gustavson would mingle with people at LGBTQ community events. He would try to meet men who were confused about their gender or their sexual identity, and he would try to manipulate them and get them to castrate themselves on camera with a karambit, a knife, or whatever, And so that is the stigma forever attached to something like LGBTQ. That's why I won't associate with people in LGBTQ unless it's work-related or something. Like if I have a job, if I'm working at a factory and there's people who work with me who are gay or whatever, or trans whatever, claim to be trans whatever, then I'll be cordial to them at work, but outside of work, they'll never see my face. Like, we'll never associate, because I don't want to be lumped into that category of the cuckings of polyamory and the snuff tapes of Marius Gustavson. You know what I mean? I just won't associate with that sort of crowd in my personal life, because I don't want to put myself at risk. Human trafficking, Peyronie's disease, is the stigma attachment to something like LGBTQ forever, now that we know about Marius Gustavson. I already knew a little bit about this sort of thing for a while. I knew about BME Pain Olympics. I had heard whisperings of these types of things when I was homeless. I saw a lot of bad behavior out of the LGBTQ community when I was homeless. And so when I found out about Marius Gustavson, it wasn't totally surprising to me. It was more like confirmation. But that is the reality of the LGBTQ community, is you're always going to have a guy with a creepy dungeon in his house with a video camera where he's going to try to get men to perform black market sex changes on themselves while he films it, right? He will go to places where he knows that men are confused about their gender, right? Pornography and LGBTQ are what enables a guy like Marius Gustavson. So that's just the reality of it. I'm sure that the conservatives and the liberals will argue with Marius Gustavson as the centerpiece of that argument, meaning the conservatives will blame LGBTQ for something like Marius Gustavson, while people in LGBTQ will blame the conservatives for lumping everybody in LGBTQ into the category of Marius Gustavson. Like, as far as how I see this, like my approach to this is just, I'm not going to be your friend if you identify with the LGBTQ program. If that's your thing, you and I won't be hanging out, because I don't want to put myself at risk for Shoto Conquer Rampant,